Hello and welcome to this session. Today we'll be discussing about cyber resilience and what does it mean for digital businesses. My name is Marko Buuri. I'm a principal risk management consultant at F-Secure Cybersecurity Services. I started my career in computer security about 15 years ago, or early 2000s, and if you were around that time, you might remember that was kind of a golden age for some of the malware on the internet. Some of the phenomena was really big at the time. For example, I remember this love letter or love bug, as it was also called. It was a big thing at the time. It made its round around companies via email and ended up costing up to $15 billion globally for businesses. And there were certainly others. There were Sasser, Slammer, MyDoom, really a golden age for computer worms. And when I look at the news today, what I see is something similar to those days. So certainly this phenomenon is not over. 2017, we've seen major worms outbreaks on the internet, but other phenomena as well. It seems like we can read about these data breaches almost weekly. They seem to happen to a lot of different types of businesses with large impact. And it's not that the global impact of this phenomenon is large. These companies that fall victim to these type of incidents, whether it was automated attacks or targeted breaches where someone was after your data, the impact can be huge. Like this year, we've seen many companies from logistics sector, for example, report huge losses because of these events. So when you're a service owner or business owner following all these news and events around the world, how should you take this into consideration when you are considering the next digital leap of your business? Does this make sense to you or not? How to react to this situation? As the technologies is getting more and more complicated, we can read about these hacks and breaches and vulnerabilities, new vulnerabilities, what seems like, if not daily, but at least weekly. This week it's something about Wi-Fi, next week it's something about encryption. How to consider, what to do about that. So today we are talking about cyber resilience. So what that means is, when you're developing your digital business, how do you take the cyber threat domain into consideration so that you are prepared to face whatever hostilities there might be in the internet and online environment towards your business goals? We'll be talking about three things now. First is about identifying all these threats and risks. How can you discuss and deal with these things? Because obviously if you don't recognize the risks, it's intangible and you can't really manage or deal with it. The second, we'll discuss about estimating these risks and potential magnitudes, so that you're better positioned to argue the right level of budgeting, how to mitigate these risks, or maybe to transfer via cyber insurance, for example. And last, we'll discuss about what kind of capabilities you should have in place to react these situations in incident response and crisis management forms. So, in my line of work, when we advise companies about these things, about cyber resilience and cyber risks, I often meet business owners, leaders who might feel like this is not in their turf. They are interested in something completely else, and I can feel and respect that. Their concern is competitiveness in their business, or how does the top line look like, and how does that develop, and where we are going as a business. However, if you're an owner or you're leader of a digitalized business, I can't help but wonder, how does your top line look like if you're going to get breached and you lose the confidence of your customers and business stakeholders? You don't have the reputation to continue in this field. The customers will turn their backs on you. So certainly it's in the interest of the business owner as well to make sure that the capabilities to deliver the operational capabilities are security-wise at the level as they are needed to be. And if you're not able to fend off these attacks, you need to make sure that when the ice breaks, you have the right people around you. They know what to do, they have the right tools and capabilities, and you know how to get out of that together. So the first step on your road to cyber resilience, it begins with identifying the risks. It begins with identifying what's out there that might attack your company, might cause your business processes to halt in IT security sense. So, but it's a difficult area because not only is the whole concept of risk very intangible, it's very abstract and difficult to kind of communicate and grasp. We are talking about cyber risk and the cyber domain, which in itself it's not that easy to kind of put into words. What do we mean by this cyber context? So there's a lot of miscommunication, and what we see often with organizations is that whether you're from IT or business side, or if you're an expert in information security, you have a very different background to these things and very different language. You are using the same vocabulary, but you mean completely different things when you're talking about threats or risks, for example. So there's miscommunication and cross-communication about these things, and that's not helpful. That's not, when you're trying to build a risk-aware culture, that's not taking you anywhere. And it of course is a problem if the business owner is not able to communicate what are the requirements and needs for security level in your organization. You have vendors, you have IT people then implementing these requirements. But if the communication and the language is not there, you're not going to have solutions in place. You're not going to have a security level in place that would be appropriate for your business. So, how to tackle this? It actually starts with taking all these relevant stakeholders within your company, have them discuss about these things together. When you're doing risk assessment, it's not a task for a single person to fill out an Excel sheet or something like that. It's a task for a team. So if you're a business owner and your duty is to identify and report and for risk management purposes, all the relevant threats and risks in the cyber domain as well, you better take all the people who know about these things and run the discussion together. So not to forget about the external stakeholders. So nowadays it's not uncommon to have multiple vendors involved in this, whether they were platform vendors or somebody who's providing you the applications and related services. We do a lot of vendor audits for our customers, and one of the most common findings is that the vendor for the application or IT service has a completely different understanding of the security domain that the customer has. And typically there are very few conditions placed on the vendors in the contracts themselves. So it could be something, an umbrella statement like you should make sure that the services are secure. But if you're not defining what security means in very concrete terms, you have a different understanding about these things. Additionally, what we've seen with vendors recently, many of the major data breaches of the previous years, one of the root causes has actually been with the third party. So somebody who has legitimate access to your environment, application or data, gets breached, gets hacked, and then the hackers or the criminals are able to take advantage of that capability that your provider has to access your content. So that's something to be aware of, certainly. So how does it actually happen, and how can you produce useful results from this discussion with your team? So one way, and one beneficial way, is to not just identify risks as one-liners or as kind of simple statements like we're getting hacked, we're getting breached. That's not a definition of a risk. What you need to do is you need to build a story. And when you have all these different people from different backgrounds around the table, information security people, or security people in general, they're very good at identifying who threat actors are. So they can tell you who are the hackers, who are the insiders you should be worried about. So they know about these things. Your IT people, they know the technology that you're using. They know its legacy, if it's recent, if they have enough resources to keep it updated, if they have it hardened or not. What are the vulnerabilities there? So you can build understanding if a hacker with a specific motivation would target your organization and there are these technical vulnerabilities, what actions he might be able to do with your data or as regards to your other capabilities. And the business people, of course, they know the impact. They are in a position to assess, what would be the implications, what would be the incident that might follow if somebody was able to, access your data or access your computer systems without authorization. So you are able to build all these stories, and the good part about these stories is that everybody can understand them. These are not one-liners or one-word explanations of very difficult things. These are something that you can express in a graphical form, and even if you don't have an understanding of how it exactly doesn't happen, you can kind of follow the logic of what's going on here. So this story, actually, end-to-end story, allows you to analyze what is needed in risk analysis, the likelihood estimations and the impact estimations. You're not able to estimate likelihood for a data breach if you don't construct a story first. So of course, when you run the discussion, there's going to be multiple stories and multiple branches. You're going to have a library of these risks, each of which might share some of the same components, but in the end they are different. They end up with different implications and different magnitude of impact, for example. So, having the right team, having the right people around the table working together, then you're a team working towards against the common adversary. So it's not that it doesn't make any sense for you to kind of argue and compete with each other, because the enemy is outside and the threats are out there that you need to face together. So, but of course, since you have a library of these risks and many stories identified, you need to make decisions about how to mitigate them, right? You want to try to remove some of these stories, you try to prevent some of these risks from actualizing, but you don't have the budget to do all of that. So you need to make decisions about, am I going to mitigate this one or the other risk? And what would be the most beneficial choice from cost-benefit point of view? You're at crossroads there. So what happens nowadays, how do companies work with these things, is that they construct all these risk lists, and they have ways to put priorities on all these lists. And one of the common ways is to label risks high, medium, low, or use color coding, something like that. But that's a good way to, if you need to prioritize and put, come up with some kind of order for all these elements. But how do you justify your security spending or security budget based on red, green, and yellow, or based on high, medium, and low? Or if you have an offer for a cyber insurance, for example, how do you determine if that's a good deal or not? I mean, it's going to cost you money, and if on the other hand you have high, medium, and low, how can you argue if it's a good deal or not? You need to have monetary values on both sides of the equation to make that decision. So, fortunately, it's possible to gather this information. What a lot of companies nowadays do is they fetch information that's out there, that's available, for example, from studies. But the problem with these studies is that these are global averages. I mean, these are based on questionnaires that companies from all over the world, on different business sectors, under different regulations, different sizes, they all answer these questionnaires, and then you come up with global averages. And these numbers are not typically very applicable to your situation and your business. So you need to take a look inside your organization and figure out how can you measure or estimate the potential magnitude of a cyber breach based on what would happen in your organization and kind of the expected reaction in your case. So the first step for that is to kind of analyze what actually might happen in your organization, or what would happen in your organization following a breach. So of course there's a number of activities that are initiated after the breach is detected, never mind how that is detected. Sometimes it's your IT people who notice something's wrong. Sometimes it's an external party that will tip you off that, okay, your services are not working right, or you're sending out spam, or by the way, a dump of what seems like your database was found in the dark web. So you should take a look at what's going on. So you start to investigate, you get organized, you alert all the right people, you initiate your incident management and major incident management, crisis management organizations, and try to figure out what's going on, if it's still happening, what should we do about this? And then you start to react to the situations. You start all the recovery activities. If you find an intruder in your system, maybe you reinstall the system, you restore all the data. You start communicating to external parties. After May 2018, if the breach was related to personal data, for example, you're obliged to notify all the data subjects of what happened. And also, following the crisis management mode, which can be typically a few weeks' time, there's going to be months of after-tail activities. I mean, you need to respond to the customer claims. Maybe they want compensations, there are damages you might be liable for. Could be litigation you need to get prepared for. You need to communicate, you need to monitor press, what's going on, how the situation is being handled, and react. So there's actually a lot of functions within your organization who are going to be involved in dealing with this situation in one way or another. Typically start with IT and InfoSec. They'll do some forensics. You can build the situational view, then the business, legal, communications, they're going to be involved. So after you've identified all these stakeholders and functions within your organization who are going to be involved in responding to this situation, you can estimate the boundaries for the level of effort that each of them will put in. You might say that for IT, for example, it'll take at least 10 work days to restore this system, but could take up to 30 work days, depending on the situation. For communications, I don't know, could take at least 40 days, could take up to 100 days, depends on, for example, media reactions and how do you need to deal with all that. You come up with these estimations and you can map them to this kind of risk model where you can analyze different forms of loss that might incur or to your organization and business following a breach. So if it's a computer system or a data set that a lot of people need for their work, of course if the system is down, it hurts your productivity. If you have a fleet of trucks or container ships, if the ships or trucks are not moving, it hurts your productivity. It requires a response, as we discussed, so IT response, all these investigation response from your business process side would hurt your reputation. The communications is going to work on that side. Revenue, there's going to be customer turnover, sanctions you need to prepare for, litigation. You identify all these activities and put it together so that you can build these kind of probability distributions using specialized software that will then tell you what is the magnitude of impact you can expect from this type of breach that you just analyzed. And this kind of results you can use to argue, should I transfer the risk? If the median risk is 1 million, should I transfer it to the insurance under insurance policy that will cost this and this much? Or if if the expected impact is going to be in this range, would it make sense for me to invest in some kind of additional security controls that might affect or are expected to affect the estimations I put in to this calculation. So this is the way to estimate cyber risks in 2017. Now, it'll help you dealing with the risk in terms of mitigating or getting help with transferring the risks to an external party, or maybe you decide to avoid the risk altogether. But if you continue the business and you can continue these operations, some level of risk will still remain despite your efforts. I think it's safe to say that there are very few organizations, if any, in the world that has the resources to remove all the risk what comes to cyber in their operations. So something remains, and you need to be prepared to react in this situation that the breach, nevertheless, your efforts might still occur. So we work on companies improving and consulting them on crisis management, and we run crisis management exercises and education to crisis management teams. But what we've noticed is that it's not only that not all companies have a well-defined crisis management team at place at all. Very few of them that do have a crisis management team actually are capable of leading a cyber crisis. And the main reason for us to conclude that is that they have never actually rehearsed it. And the type of crisis that a typical crisis management organization or team rehearses, say yearly, is something related to physical events like fires or accidents, something like that, or it's a business disruption, not of where the root cause is not cyber related. So it would be a good idea to actually, when you are increasing the level of digitalization in your core business operations, it would be a good idea for all the companies to actually run these rehearsals, so you know how to build a situational view, how to kind of gather the information you need to make decisions, and what are the kind of decisions you need to make in these situations where you expect or suspect that somebody's taking your data or maybe holding your systems for ransom. What do you do then? Certainly there are, media has covered a lot of cases where this hasn't gone really well, and usually the public reactions can be really harsh. And in the long term, that's going to take you quite a while to kind of get it together and restore confidence of your business partners and customers. And it really comes to the question of initial reactions and what kind of information you are releasing to the stakeholders, if it makes sense. And hopefully, the worst situation is really when you are contradicting yourself and you're first saying that we didn't get hacked, but later you need to admit that it actually was the case. You were operating under false assumptions or false information because of your immature incident response, for example. So, define the incident response and crisis management procedures. Who's doing what? How are you dividing the tasks? How are you getting organized? How do you build the situational view in a cyber crisis? Maybe write some playbooks about your core business processes. How do you expect to react to these situations if your core information was taken or the system were held for ransom? And also communication. So in addition to these bad examples, there have been very recent good examples as well about crisis communication and how to handle that well. And of course, Maersk, being in the business that they are, they actually have a very polished and a good crisis management, crisis communication mechanisms inside the house. They've had situations other than this in previous years. So they are very good at this. And that's why you need to, it really shows that when you practice this, and it's one of the kind of the core operations, and you adopt that, you need to be aware and alert for crisis situations all the time in your business. It really helps you to build those capabilities, because as we know, practice is what makes you perfect, and if you don't practice these or rehearse these things, you're never going to be good at crisis management or communications. And to build up the resilience and capabilities, you need to kind of be determined, whether it was kind of improving the risk culture and language in your organization, getting all the stakeholders involved as a business owner, getting the IT and third parties involved in identifying what are the risks we are facing together, and raising the bar when it comes to evaluating the risks, analyzing and evaluating, and coming up with defendable estimations of the potential financial impacts. It'll help you in the long run, and those are the activities that will help you build the cyber resilience for your company in the future. Thank you very much.